Welcome to the Power Hour, Optometry's biggest and longest running show. I'm your host, Eugene Shatsman, and today we're talking technology, but not in the abstract. We're talking about tools that are actively reshaping both the clinical and the patient experience aspects in optometric practices right now. In this episode, I am joined by two innovators with two different vantage points. Grant from Altris AI comes from a company that's using artificial intelligence to transform how OCT data is interpreted and how it's communicated. And Steven from Adit is talking about a platform that's designed to unify patient communication and make things easier in your practice. So today we explore what innovation really looks like in today's practices. And some of us are maybe just not even aware that this stuff is available and available now. We talk about where the biggest opportunities lie, what's holding practices back, and also how technology can stop being just another thing to manage and start becoming a force multiplier for growth and patient satisfaction. We also cover some barriers to adoption, AI in the exam lane, automated recalls. We talk about tech-enabled practice of 2028 and what that'll look like. We talk about things like AIs talking to other AIs in the future. And it's a really just kind of a wild, fascinating, but also practical conversation. So if you're running a practice and wondering what tech tools are worth exploring, or you just want to hear what's on the horizon and what's coming, this is an episode you're going to enjoy. As always, let me know what you think at eugeneshatsman.com or on the Power Hour website, and make sure that you're subscribed on Spotify, YouTube, Apple, or wherever you get your shows. And now let's go to today's episode. All right, Grant and Steven, welcome to the Power Hour, guys.
Glad to be here.
All right, so I think that the best way to start the conversation is for each of you to just spend 60 seconds giving the audience a really brief introduction to the innovation that you're bringing to the industry, and also just a little bit of background of who you are. Grant, you want to go first?
Sure. Altris AI was founded in 2017 in Chicago. University of Chicago is our first investor, but the company's been built mostly in Ukraine. So we're a Ukrainian company. A lot of our employees are now in other countries because of the challenges over there. But we've built an AI for OCT that works on all the OCT manufacturers that's built around decision support, making it easier to identify 70 different pathologies, biomarkers, and enable physicians to be faster, as well as make sure they see everything that comes up in those tests.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but it's interesting the clinical applications of your work in terms of where optometry is headed. Steven, give us a little bit of a background too.
Yeah, to shed some light on Adit. So we've been around as a company for about 12 years. We actually, a lot of people don't know this, but we started as a marketing agency 12 years ago, working with medical practices like dentists and optometrists. And we started creating pieces of software to help our marketing clients, like scheduling, review generation, in which we took a deeper look at our business platform and decided, there's 1,000 marketing companies, but very few all-in-one software companies. So we took about a year to develop an all-in-one software. We launched it first in the dental space about 7 years ago. 4,000 dentists currently use the Adit platform, and we took a look into optometry and thought this is an industry we could truly serve the best. And we launched it about a year ago in optometry.
Purpose of the software is to do what for optometry, and why is it so innovative?
Yeah, so we combined what you would typically have to hire about 4 to 5 different companies to provide in a singular platform. So everything from phone systems, patient communications, advanced analytics platforms, review generation. We've managed to create this all in a singular platform for practices.
Okay, great. And we'll jump in more as to how that actually drives revenue and also helps practices grow shortly. But I think I'd like to ask both of you guys is, what's from your vantage point as both innovators in the space, as both people who are selling technology in the space, what's changed in the past few years that's made optometry more open to innovation and new tools? Steven?
I would say necessity. I've been in the optometry space the last 11 years, and it's been the same names the last 11 years for the services we provide in software. And there needed to be another company to step up with advanced technology to take optometry, to the next level of this kind of technology.
Yeah, Grant, what do you think?
I think there's a lot of factors. COVID was a big impact. We saw telemedicine become huge during that time, which required a lot of practices to have to upgrade instruments, change technology. That was a big impact. But also this next generation, we've got a lot of people getting ready to retire that need care, as well as we've got a generation coming up that's kind of demanding a different level of care.
Yeah, and in your case, what prompted the development of AI specifically for like the OCT interpretation component?
Yeah, so our co-founder is a retina specialist from Kiev, and she was looking to find a way that could help her with better referrals as well as increase the knowledge of those that are referring to her. And so they first built an actual app that's on the App Store right now. You can download. It's funny at trade shows, people come up to us not realizing that the app is us as well. That's about OCT training. And so there's just we took this approach of coming from the clinic side. How do we help the clinic? And grow from there.
Yeah, and you know, I think that there's an interesting concept of adoption, which we're going to jump into shortly. But I'm curious to hear, you know, our practices embracing AI based innovations right now, or are they still a little cautious?
On my side, there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of people looking at it, a lot of people kicking tires. I think there's a lot of concern. People are kind of worried about how are they going to use AI and how is it going to be implemented. And I think that's one of the things you really have to look at is how can you, at this point, I think, how could you not be using AI? Everyone's using it for everywhere you go, it's being used. So it's a matter of really jumping on or being left behind in some ways.
All right, so we're going to jump into the clinical piece of it shortly. But Stephen, from your vantage point, what do you think is going on in the minds of the patients, the consumers, and why is and how have communication needs evolved over time that require some innovation in that area?
Yeah, I would say from an aspect, let's say patient communications, our ability to ensure patients are showing up to appointments or retaining patients. I would say adding lines of communication. So something unique we do is we don't just send text messages or emails to remind patients to show up to those appointments or to recall so they don't churn. We've actually created automated voice calls on behalf of the practice as well. So now they have phone calls on their behalf, emails and texts, so saving staff time and making it easier for these patients to show up to their appointments.
Do those phone calls leverage AI at that point, or do they sound like? Can you make them sound like the doctor yet?
We have some amazing AI innovations releasing over the next about 60 days, where it would actually sound like it would be the doctor's voice, the office manager's voice, and that's coming soon.
That would be super cool, but kind of creepy. You know, this is Eugene's clone calling you to remind you that. And this is Ryan Seacrest calling you to remind you of your appointment at this that you need to go see the eye doctor. So let's talk at like practical, super in the practice level. So I kind of Grant, you need to. I think people are not always familiar with what happens through the process of an OCT. So maybe you can just kind of like talk through the clinical flow of how
Sure.
an AI can support what typically happens in a practice with an OCT.
Yeah, so many practices have standardized on OCT, and you're seeing that more and more. They're putting OCT into their practice, and every patient's getting an OCT, and they're using it to screen for pathology, screen for diseases. And I think it's a great opportunity to catch things early. The challenge is these devices weren't always necessarily designed for screening, and so sometimes you can get information that someone's got a little bit different anatomy. Some things might throw someone off, and what we've done is build a tool that makes it easier so when that data comes in, they can look at it quickly and make a decision from there. But really, the workflow is the patient comes in, they usually go straight to the OCT, they get it done, they go into the exam lane, they might do refraction, they might do something else, but then at that point, the physician's reviewing the test results.
And the physician is reviewing the results as interpreted by AI, or I mean, just humor me for a second. There's going to be some people who are listening to this and say, "I don't have a problem reviewing the OCT. I do it every day. I do it 10 times a day. Well, why do I need this?"
Well, part of it's going to be patient education. So we've got several docs in the U.S. that are using it that way right now. Is they know what they're looking at, but the patient doesn't. And so if you're showing a grainy black and white B scan and you're scrolling through it and trying to tell the patient what they're looking at, there might be some confusion there. Where we're adding in color and identifying different pathologies and showing what it is, it's great it's great for the physician just to make sure they're not going to miss anything, or just to validate. Really what we're trying to do is validate what they already know. Show them and say, yes, I agree, I don't agree. Look at that. But then again, for the patient, being able to show them what it is really important.
Got it. So it comes down to patient communication, patient value in some capacity. And it also
Yeah.
comes to, and then now this is where it kind of gets, when I show the patient, what am I showing them, and why? Again, why do I need AI to interpret it for the patient? Why can't the doctor interpret it for the patient?
And they certainly can. I believe there's a lot of doctors who are really good at it. We launched a new feature at Vision Expo West, or sorry, Vision Expo East, that's optic disc analysis. So we're looking at the macula and the optic disc now. And one of the features of that is we're using disc damage likelihood scale. And I can look at 8 of the last visits all aligned next to each other. And one of the big benefits of that with the patient, especially with glaucoma, patients who are on drops, a lot of times they're not using the drops because they don't see a difference. But the problem with that is as soon as they stop using the drops, that's when the difference happens. And so being able to educate them and show them, hey, this is staying stable. That's what we want. You're doing a good job. Follow this. Where if I was just looking at, a visual field report or the OCT, trying to explain that to the patient, it could be challenging versus showing them a history.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting because I immediately go to Steven's role on this call is I think about what's the ideal patient communication flow. What have you found, Steven, when it comes to reaching patients, getting patients to come back more often, getting patients to actually understand the value that their eye care provider is bringing to them versus all of their other available options? What's the best way to communicate that to patients?
Yeah, I would say, to be honest, is staying on top of your marketing to your patients of the services that are available, and what you could do. So obviously, a lot of the patient base for certain practices don't understand, the vast array of services they offer. Like they could correct their eyesight wearing contacts overnight with orthokeratology, things like that. So we have an amazing email campaign system built in, where we could really educate patients better on their options out there.
Yeah, and are you saying, and I'm just curious, techniques wise, what gets the most reach? Is it email? Is it text message? Is it voice call? Like what's the best way mechanism wise to reach a patient?
It's text message, hands down. 90% of people read a text in 3 minutes or less. And I mean, you could probably agree with me. If you don't recognize a phone number, you most likely don't answer it. You probably don't check your emails as frequently as your text. So I'd say text is king.
Yeah, so I've seen something really similar, and one of my sort of, I guess, not a secret anymore, but one of the things I talk about sometimes is how MMS is so much better than SMS, right? You got, because an MMS includes a picture. Yes, it's 3 times the price of an SMS, but we're still talking pennies. And usually, if you include a picture, then because people get spam text messages all the time now, yeah, and it's kind of a growing concern, and carriers are doing something to try to prevent it, but not enough. And so you don't want to be labeled as spam, and you don't want the patient to think you're spam. So one of the things that if you get a text message from someone you don't recognize, if it includes a picture, and that picture is either a picture of your doctor or a picture of or a logo of the practice or something that they can recognize, seems like that's been a really big lift in terms of conversion rates from patient communication.
I'd agree with that. And I'd say making sure your texts are blue and not green is huge. So things like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So let's talk about how you measure impact. And this is, Stephen, I'm going to start with you. As if a practice switches their communication tools to something that is much more innovative, but like I will say, I think the industry is fairly saturated. You've got lots of tools. Some start with a W, some start with an S, some start with a number, but they got lots of tools that a practice can use to potentially communicate with their patients and to be able to uh, work well in the space of, or at least in their minds, work well in the space of communicating with patients. What are they missing? where's the impact? Where are the hidden dollars? If I'm paying for something that already does some sort of job to communicate with my patients, what rock should I be looking under to find those dollars?
Yeah, so we, coming from the dental background, and if you want to talk about saturation for this technology, dentistry is 10 times the amount of companies, which breeds us to create really amazing products to step to shine. So we actually have a system called Practice Analytics, and we provide analytics in a way no one has introduced to optometry. So we could actually provide dashboards each month that show every patient that's entered recall that month, if they got scheduled or they overdue. We have advanced analytics to show at practice how many patients they're churning each month. And then we can actually take these patients and put them into mass text campaigns, mass email campaigns to reactivate them. So we provide much more advanced tools than anyone else as far as measuring metrics and making them actionable.
How do you get a patient to not leave? Meaning, if you start mass texting them, one of the concerns I've heard is that if you text them too often, they're going to unsubscribe. If you email them too often, they're going to unsubscribe. And if you are the primary patient communication tool that practice is using, then what the heck does that practice has lost the ability to contact that practice, or that practice has lost the ability to contact that patient altogether.
I agree. You really shouldn't be the practice releasing promos every 2 weeks and burdening, patients with these ongoing text campaigns or emails. You got to be tactful, and you got to specifically, target specific patients for these different things. So the cool thing about Adit is we can actually create lists from the EHR of specific patients that would be ideal candidates for specific campaigns. So we're able to appeal to a specific demographic versus doing the shotgun approach and doing too much.
Yeah. So what does that look like, for example?
Yeah, so something great about us, let's say you wanted to run a campaign specific for pediatrics. We could isolate a list of patients by an age range from the EHR. We could put together a campaign that you may want to have more oriented around children. We could specifically isolate patients you've done previous consults with. So somebody, let's say you want to see a list of every patient you did a dry eye consult for the last year. I could isolate that list. And then with that list, I could do marketing or promotions relevant to that service. So I'm not just, again, doing a shotgun approach. It's targeted.
Right. But the practice is running that. What happens on autopilot that is not happening in other places? Because, and what you're describing is, somebody at the practice has to go pull these lists, come up with the campaigns, pull all the stuff. I totally get it. And I think that's a valiant effort, for sure. But at the same time, there's all kinds of things that run on autopilot in the practice. And I think that's what a lot of people are looking for, is they're looking for an autopilot solution that I can just kind of plug and chug. And this solution helps me communicate and engage with my patients. So what are you guys doing on autopilot that really, based off of your dashboards and your data, delivers the most amount of impact?
Yeah, I would say, it's going to be the patient communication suite. So that's our ability to automate their confirmations of appointments, reminders, recalls, eyewear ready reminders, contacts lens ready, where those are on autopilot, automated text, email, phone calls, really, delivering this with automations, taking away manual work of having to call these patients, things of that nature. So those features are all completely autopilot.
And if I have some of these other tools that are common in the optometric space that I might have mentioned before, what are you guys doing that they're not on autopilot?
So we are able to create everything in one spot, right? So autopilot, we're obviously doing the patient communications. We're able to autopilot their review generation. We're able to autopilot their patient forms, digitize those to be automatically sent out before an appointment and integrate back to the EHR. We're really autopiloting their whole front office. So a variety of services.
Got it. Okay, good. So now let's talk a little bit about integrating, and I want to think about if a practice, and Grant, I want to go back to you. Um, what are some of the biggest objections or challenges that you hear when you approach a practice and you say, I've got this great tool, right? I can, and for you guys specifically, you can read the OCT better, you can communicate the value, or you can communicate the value of the exam potentially better to the patient. And the doctor has more information, the patient has more information. It sounds great. What are the biggest objections that you're hearing in the field? What are some of the biggest obstacles that you're hearing from practices when you're presenting them with your solution?
I would say a lot of it comes down to they're already comfortable with OCT and they're not seeing the value. When Steven was talking earlier, I was thinking, man, it'd be great to create a program that looks at all the patients that haven't had an OCT in the last 6 months and send them a message saying we've got this new AI tool. Come in and see how your OCT is being used with that. So I think there's certainly a big part of its patient engagement, but there's also that just make sure I don't miss anything, make sure that I'm comfortable with everything that I'm seeing because if you think about AI, humans are in the 80 percentile of effectiveness. Most AIs are in the 90 plus percentile. And so there's that gap there that it might be just a little bit better. It might find some things, but generally, the pushback is either they don't have an OCT yet, or they're looking at a lot of different technologies they're going to add and trying to figure out what's the right one next for them.
Yeah, and I'm kind of, let me get both of your opinions on this, guys. If I had an AI tool in my practice and I tried to reach out to patients, how receptive do you think patients would be to say, hey, we're now using AI to look inside your eye, and we're now an AI powered practice? How receptive do you think a practice would be, and what would you say to the patient that gets them super excited about it, if a patient would be excited about it? Steven, you're a marketer. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, if we think about AI and the growth and really 2 years ago, the capabilities we have today, people would have thought was just, in a sci-fi movie, right? I think it's growing and it's not going anywhere. And I think patients at this point are maybe not as comfortable as they're going to be even a week from now. But I think it's a growing necessity and people are coming to light that it's something that's going to be involved in our daily lives here on out.
Grant, what do you think? What kind of
Uh,
patient communication do you think you've heard that's effective?
I've got a great story about this. About 2 months ago, I got a call from a person in Canada asking about our software. I'm talking to him for 20 minutes before I realize it's not a physician. This guy's a 67-year-old tugboat captain who has AMD. He was seeing his doctor, asked his doctor if there was AI. The doctor said he didn't know. This tugboat captain went home, went on the internet, and he found me. And I'm talking about what we can do. And he offered to pay for the doctor subscription for the doctor to use it on him. And so
Hmm.
if you got a guy that's driving tugboats that's in his late 60s that's asking for it, you got to believe with ChatGPT and Gemini and all these other AIs out there, people are just kind of expecting it. I think they'd be more surprised that you aren't using it.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you because I think that our consumer experience is quickly evolving to integrate AI into so many parts of our lives. And I know that I'm a little bit more of an early adopter maybe than some of my colleagues, but the reality is that you can't search Google today and ask a question without getting an AI generated response, right? So it's almost like I think at some point in the future you'll probably walk into a practice and expect it as a patient, and it would be the same thing as if the practice was like, hey, we're still using a fax machine, we don't have the internet, we can't email use anything. Like, it might maybe not quite as stark, but I kind of like the idea of saying we're an AI enabled practice. AI supports the clinical work that we do with our patients, and AI supports the communication that we have with our patients to make it more convenient, more effective, and that kind of thing. So, when you hear this again, why aren't more practices reaching out to you and saying let's go, Grant?
The biggest challenge we have is people knowing we exist. We're a small startup and we've been to several shows, but getting people to see we're there is our biggest challenge right now. Part of the reason, I'm here talking with you. But I liked your Google analogy. What I've started seeing more and more people doing is they're actually using ChatGPT to search instead of Google now. Because with Google, I'm searching and then trying to find a website that'll tell me what I'm looking for. With ChatGPT, it just tells me. And I know Google's starting to do that as well, but it's kind of that shift, right? People who've been using OCT for a long time, it's kind of like searching on Google for a long time. Now there's just a better way to do it.
And it's funny. I've been following what percentage of um, what percentage of the search market ChatGPT has, and right now it's still in the single digits for sure, but it is really interesting to see how many people begin their, when you think about the types of behaviors that we have. I think sometimes when we're looking for a local business, we still go to Google, right? If I'm looking for an eye
Sure.
doctor, I still type in eye doctor near me on Google. And if we're looking maybe for a solution, like I have my remote broke and I want to fix my remote, I might go to ChatGPT, I might go to Google, but in both cases, I'm expecting the solution to pop out at me without me having to go click on 5 different websites and try to find something or whatever. I may also go to YouTube, I guess, if I'm looking for a video on how to repair that. Stephen, what do you think?
I'm with you 100% on that. I actually do almost every search now from ChatGPT, so I'm completely aligned with that. So yeah, we definitely have to find ways to incorporate that in anything we're providing to practices.
So, how will AI change patient communication in the future from your vantage point?
So, I mean, some releases we have. So, from my own, experience here at Adit, not to talk too much on what we don't have yet, but I mean, we're actually rolling out some features that would automate their scheduling through calls. So, essentially, you could call, speak to an AI representative, and they can actually book appointments for these practices.
Got it. That's interesting. Um, and I'm curious, if you guys have tested that or not. What's the likelihood that a patient would care or prefer one versus another, a human versus an AI to schedule an appointment?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little too soon to say. It's in beta right now, but we do give an option with the AI where they could bypass it. So, obviously, I think there's a mixture, right? So, as to the exact metrics, I'm not too sure yet.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think this will be. I mean, look, guys, anytime I call a company, and I had to call a company recently, there was a problem with my insurance, and I had to call my insurance company for my house. And in speaking, and like, there's an automated auto attendant, and then I'm just trained now as a consumer to just be like representative, representative, operator, 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 come on, yeah, give me a human. And that's how my experience goes before I start cursing at it, and then sometimes it will recognize that. So um my I'm hopeful that we're not creating another objection or another barrier or piece of point of friction in the patient experience by adding AI to the ever important phone call, because a lot of phone calls, they're like, I don't know if I trust the technology to answer all my questions. But at the same time, you guys are both absolutely right. Like, we go to Google and we trust, or we go to Chat GPT and we trust what that AI tells us to solve whatever problems we have. So I think it's an interesting it's an interesting shift. What else from a patient communication, Stephen, are you guys looking at that might be that may help drive an AI based patient experience in some capacity?
Yeah, I would say in the call coaching realm. So essentially, we do record every call. So we do introduce some AI tools that can actually depict how well that front desk rep is actually handling calls and their conversion rates of calls from patient leads to actually booked appointments. So I think that's a really imperative tool we're rolling out as well.
Interesting. So you guys, that coaching gets provided to the practice, the representative themselves, or the practice owner, practice manager? How does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, we want to definitely give it to someone in a managerial role, an owner or a practice manager, whoever is more hands-on. But I mean, from again a marketing background myself, we definitely want to ensure that they are coaching their front desk of how to handle inquiries and make sure those are flagged and do call coaching, once a week at least.
Mhm. Interesting. Um, and I think it's important to think about all of the AI enabled components of the patient experience. Grant, what's on the horizon when you look out into the industry right now and you say, okay, we've got this piece of the piece of the patient experience that we're that we're AI enabling or that we're powering with AI. What else is there that you think would be such an important part of a patient experience?
Wow, that's a big question. I think what's going to be in the future, we're going to start seeing is AIs talking to each other, where my AI may talk to Steven's AI and start, combining information and sharing between AIs. I think that's really where you're going to start to, seeing things. I've seen some now where some people's email is answering other people's email, which I think is fantastic. I'd much rather someone else read my email than me. But, you're going to see some of these new technologies really start to integrate with each other in a meaningful way.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I I look at all of the different things you could do in a practice to try to add an AI component to either the operations experience or the patient experience, right? You could either make the operation more efficient, you could make the operation more, um, we'll call it patient centric, and also you could enhance the patient experience where the patient knows that they're having direct contact with an AI facilitated by the practice. One of the questions I kind of, you have to answer a little bit, and maybe this is a little bit philosophical, is that, if AI is reading my OCT, why do I need my doctor? What's the purpose long term, big picture?
That's a great one. What I like to say is, AI is not there to replace you, it's to make you indispensable. Really, because our AI is not, we're not clear to diagnose. And that's really important I put out there is we're not clear to diagnose, we're decision support. So what we do is we provide as much information as possible to the physician for them to make a decision. They're going to look at it and choose and decide with their experience what they're going to do next. I think you never want to get rid of the doctor because there's so many other factors that you need to build into it. The eye care market is really fascinating because as a physician, they have more testing than almost any other specialty. They've got more information coming at them, and I wouldn't trust to be replaced by that. There was an article that came out today that there's a hospital in China that's all AI, that there's no doctors there, but I don't know that I'm ready for that.
Yeah. It's interesting because I mean, the concept of patient care ultimately comes down to the feeling of being cared about, right? The patient needs to walk out of the practice feeling like somebody took good care of them, and I'm not so sure that a robot can necessarily make them feel that way, at least in a super genuine way. When we come back from the break, I'm going to ask you guys about future proofing practices with technology and what you guys see on the horizon. We'll be right back. All right, we're back on the Power Hour. Steven, Grant, excited to continue the conversation with you guys. So I want to take a moment. You guys are both in the technology space. And I want to take a moment and ask you guys, from your vantage point, what does an optometry, a technology-enabled optometry practice, fully integrated with technology, look like 2 or 3 years from now? Imagine you're walking into the state of the art optometry practice of the future in, I don't know, call it 2028 or something like that. What does that practice look like? Steven, let's start with you.
Yeah, I would say, it's probably going to look like a lot, probably less staff members. I think a lot of the creations we have with AI, things like that, a lot of these things will seem redundant with some staff or some of the features. I think the technology we're going to have in the next few years is going to be extremely impressive, and I think it's going to be a whole new outlook.
Yeah. And, when you're saying fewer staff, you're saying the technology is doing it, but what about the patient experience?
Definitely. So when I say fewer staff, I mean staff really refocusing on what matters most. So doing less paperwork, making less calls that are unnecessary, and really getting more focused on patient care.
Mm-hmm. Grant, what about you?
Yeah, building on what Steven said, if you go into a practice right now, if you said that you could take someone's job away and say, okay, we can eliminate that position, most people are going to say, great, now I've got 12 other things that person can do that they aren't doing right now. There's plenty of work for everybody. It's just putting them in the right path. I think the technology of the future is really more about patient care. I was watching a thing on Oracle Health has got this new AI that they're launching that's listening to the doctor in the room and transcribing and doing the charting just from the voice. And it does it in like 27 languages. and it can do two languages at once. And so it's really kind of fascinating. I think the future is, the provider is going to be able to walk in and just talk to the patient, be able to have a human conversation where when EMRs first came out, you started seeing the back of the doctor more often than anything because they're talking over their shoulders, they're typing. So really, for me, the future is really better patient care. Really, we still need that human connection.
Yep. And I think it's interesting because one of the things that you've talked about is having a more educated patient so that the patient can probably make decisions faster and can feel more informed. And if you talk about, Stephen, from your vantage point of having the tools that facilitate patient education ahead of time as they're walking into that chair, and then using technology to bring it all together, I think you could have a more operationally efficient practice, a practice that is more focused on the patient experience, and patients who feel way better and way more informed about walking into an eye care practice because they feel like they've gotten the resources that they need. The doctor is the final expert, but the patient walks in, they didn't just Google something that's super unreliable, but they have the metrics, they have the data, and they also have some education that helps them understand what the doctor is talking about in that face-to-face interaction that they have, right?
And I think having the ability to educate those patients beforehand with resources to educate them is going to increase the conversion rates of those patients to accepting treatment.
Yeah. And so let's talk a little bit about the biggest impediments to what you guys are doing or what you're seeing right now. What happens in the optometric space today that prevents doctors from adopting the technology that will make them super successful in this futuristic 2028 practice? Stephen, you go first.
Yeah, I would say definitely, their ability to accept where things are going with technology and embrace it is going to put them in a position to be at the best spot in that time.
Yeah, Grant?
I use the example of my wife, when she had a BlackBerry, trying to get her to go from the BlackBerry to the iPhone was almost impossible because she just loved the way that keyboard felt. And, the way I got her to change is when she told me she likes to be able to feel the keyboard as she's driving because she can text easier feeling the buttons. And that was like, okay, that's dangerous. Let's stop doing that. But in some ways, that's just like the medical practice, right? They're so used to doing something some way that the times are changing. There's certain things we need to change. We need to do differently. And I can't even imagine her not having an iPhone now. She does, she's talking to it more than she's texting or typing on it now. So it's how those things change, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting because you think about the way that you think about the way that we've all gone through the process of adopting technology in our lives as consumers, right? I mean, it was just a mere 15 years ago that Google and the smartphone kind of came together to create the consumer's ability to have all of their information or all of the world's information easily accessible from their pocket. I still remember doing research in a college library, right? Like I remember that stuff, and uh, my thought is, as we continue to kind of progress towards more technology acceptance from the patient, I think that in their day to day lives, I think they're going to have higher technology expectations for us as providers when we're sitting in the chair and we're talking to them. I think they're going to be less impressed if we're not using technology to enhance that experience, or if there's obvious friction that could be eliminated by technology because they went to, I don't know, their dentist or their hairdresser or the oil change place, and all of those places adopted technology in a way that made the consumer experience much more frictionless.
The dentist is a great example. When I go to the dentist, they put noise canceling headphones and they turn Netflix on and they lay you back. It's a real experience now. And I think patients are just expecting that kind of level of making it exciting.
Yeah, that's actually that's really good experience example. Although, how do they get you to open your mouth then if you're sitting there because mine's always yelling at me, open, open, open.
Yeah, I think they start tapping your arm or something
That's
to
good.
make it do it. But it certainly makes it. I like it just because I find what other people have been watching on Netflix, so I can find something new to watch.
Yeah, I I think that's kind of cool. So let's do a little bit of. I'm going to ask one question, and then each of you guys have a chance to answer, and you decide who wants to go first based off of your perspective. But I love to bring people in with different vantage points on the industry, and so the things you guys do kind of give you unique perspectives, and our audience probably appreciates hearing from somebody who is not necessarily seeing patients every day, but is talking about a very specific part of the technological path of the practice. So I'm going to ask you guys quick fire responses from you guys. So what's one myth that you would like to bust about tech in optometry?
I think that it's going to replace people. I think it's not going to replace people. It's just going to allow them to do more.
Okay, Steven, you, I think, believe that we're going to have practices with lower number of people. So maybe it is going to replace people. Maybe it's. What do you think?
Well, on that note, I do think, obviously it would decrease the need for as much staff to an extent, and at the end of the day, it's going to increase the bottom line of a business.
Yeah. So you may disagree with Grant Smith. Okay, what's one myth you'd like to bust? See if Grant disagrees with it.
I would just say, let's talk on the topic of switching programs and really it being a huge undertaking for staff and changes. I think a lot of practices are a bit apprehensive to switching their systems and getting the staff used to something that's new. I think typically once you set up a new system that's enhanced, that really benefits the staff more.
Yeah, and it makes sense. By the way, on the topic of change management, how do you guys get practices to buy in when you introduce new technology? And I'll come back to my lightning round questions. I'm just curious, I know, and I've talked to a lot of people who have technology, who bring technology into practice, and even in the form of a big white box that's supposed to do a lot of great things and it's supposed to make you a ton of money, and it's going to be so great and it's going to be so awesome, and you just paid a whole bunch of money for it. So like you're bought in, like literally you're bought in. And then somehow you walk into that practice and, you open the closet and there's like three more of those exact same things in the closet that the practice thought was a good idea, really got excited about, and then just it never really took off. So how do you get practices to do this, to actually get into the concept of change management? Steven, you want to go first?
Yeah, definitely, and it is a consistent concern. The doctor sees it and they think it's amazing. They're concerned, well, how's my staff going to feel about us, uprooting our whole system, right? So the way I always explain it is you need to convey to them we're taking away the mundane tasks that they do not want to do. So I don't think anyone wants to sit there all day and take a patient form that's been filled on pen and paper and scan that in and manually type in all that information and read poor handwriting. No one wants to do that all day. So if I could automate all of that and have it seamless and have them refocus on items they rather focus on, then who wouldn't want to make their life easier?
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Grant, what about you guys on change management?
I think the huge value we have is you don't have to load any software. We're a website, and the technician exports a file from the OCT, it uploads to the cloud. There's really nothing to install. And so the idea of putting it in isn't a huge lift. You're not doing a long training. It's like a 20-minute training. You're not shutting the clinic down for half a day to roll this in or slowing patients down. And the other big advantage of our solution is that it's a subscription model. So if after 6 months it's not working, you're not locked in forever. You don't have that thing in the closet that you bought.
Mm-hmm. That does make sense. I think a little bit of, but the change management component is like getting the doctor to change how they do their exam. I find that that's not easy. So if you're saying, hey, incorporate this tool and then use this tool to show the patient, like, how do you do that?
I would say you've actually hit one of the hardest things out there, right? Because most of the things that physicians buy for their practice, they're not using. That OCT, they're looking at the report, but they're not the one using it. So it's not impacting how they see patients necessarily. When they buy a new auto refractor, when they buy something else, the physician isn't the one using it, where something like what we're providing, they are using it. And so getting them comfortable with it, the biggest value we have is that our interface is super easy. It's really fast and quick to pick it up and use it. And that's the biggest challenge. I mean, I'm sure you remember rolling out EMRs. I've heard that some practice administrators have threatened to quit if you change EMRs. And We're completely opposite of that.
Hmm. And it is interesting because on one end, you're right. It's hard to get the doctor to change the way they do their exam. On the other end, it's the doctor got excited about it. They can now play with the tool that they just got excited about. So that makes sense. All right, back to a question for each of you, kind of lightning round here. So, if you had to pick one metric to judge a practice's health, what would it be and why?
Yeah, I would say net growth each month, right? So looking at how many new patients we're generating, how many patients we're churning, right? So keeping that into effect, because if you had a massive new patient month and you saw 50 new patients, but then that same month 60 patients went inactive in your system, then that's not really a healthy growth, is it?
What is going inactive? How do you decide if a patient's active or inactive, Stephen?
So we let the practice, have a bit of discretion in that, but we typically say around 24 months without a visit, it's going to be pretty likely they're going to probably go to a competitor or be seeing a new optometrist.
Hmm. And do you measure that on a regular basis to say, here's how many went inactive, here's how many went, here's how many new ones you got, and do you like have a dashboard to show people that?
We do, yeah. Within our practice analytics platform, we have a net growth dashboard that shows those exact metrics, and we can extract the patients who went to that churn threshold and get them into an email campaign, text campaign. I always suggest small promotion. Hey, it's been a while since we've seen you. We want to offer 10% off your next exam, things like that. So we do have those capabilities, and I believe we're the only one who does in the industry.
Interesting. Really fascinating. Okay. Grant, what's your metric?
I was listening to another podcast a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about the optometric practice and what's the best thing for the practice, and it boiled down to what's the best thing for the patient. If you're taking care of the patient, then that's going to help your practice grow. And so I think that's really what it boils down to: is how are you taking care of your patients? Are you using technology as most possible to give them the best care? And I think if you do that, then the metrics will go up, like Steven's talking about.
So you're talking about a patient experience type of metric, like a
Yeah,
number around patient experience, patient satisfaction, or something like that.
yeah.
Got it. Okay. What's one? Now I'm gonna shift gears completely back to lightning round questions. What is one technology failure that you guys have experienced, and what have you learned from it? And how does that impact what you're doing today?
I would say from us when we first launched our software, it's a new undertaking, and I'd say 7 years ago, they're definitely you integrate to new EHRs, you have to figure out exactly how those work. We're rolling out massive technology like phone systems, so when we did first launch the software, there definitely were some hiccups, things like that, but we learned and we grew, and we've overcome that.
Got it, Grant?
So are you asking like a technology failure from our company or just in general, something that
Just in
we've,
general, whatever. It could be yours, it could be somebody else's.
yeah, gosh, I got to say the Microsoft Zoom, the media player, that was, it just didn't have the audience, right?
And that's an interesting example because there was the iPod, right? And
Yeah.
everybody had the iPod at the time. And then Microsoft did have a substantial amount of market share on software, and it, people, and it had brand awareness. Why do you think it failed, and what do we learn from it?
I think it's core competence, right? It's interesting though, because at that time it was a failure for Microsoft, but then they came out with the Xbox. So, I think they looked at what they're good at and they focused on that. Where, Apple has been in the entertainment industry forever. And so focusing on music and things like that really worked out for them. Where Microsoft focusing on technology, it worked out for them. So it could be the same for the practice, right? What are you good at? Focusing on that.
Yeah, that's a great insight. Okay, so as we wrap up, Stephen, I'll have you go first. Where can listeners learn more about Adit?
Yeah, so visit adit.com, and we do complimentary consultations, walkthroughs, screen shares at your leisure. So just schedule a demo from adit.com. I'll buy you lunch if you do a demo with us. We'll go ahead and shoot you a $25 gift card and learn about how we can really advance your practice.
And Grant, what about you guys? How can people learn about Altris?
So you can find us on Altris AI. which before I came here, I didn't know .ai was like .com, but Altris AI is our website. We're on LinkedIn a lot as well. You can see a lot of our content there. And we can do live demos. We can pull your data in and show you how that looks. So happy to consult or show anybody who's interested.
Yeah, and you know what? I think what we've talked about today is really a fascinating mix of clinical technology and patient experience technology. And the reason I wanted to pull the episode together is because there's a synthesis that's not necessarily so obvious, but it exists. And you know, technology can help solve problems that we're all people have heard me say this a lot, but you know, we were all facing problems in our practice. Oftentimes, the solution is technology, and it now is becoming more often than not. The solution is not more people or better people. Sometimes it's technology to empower those people. So, if you're running a practice, you're looking to streamline, reduce risk, or improve the patient experience, now at this point, you've got at least 2 new tools to check out and learn a little bit more. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and thanks guys for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time.